Does ethnically integrating school classes reduce prejudice? Thus, is there less prejudice among children who have contact with classmates from ethnic minority groups? Past scientific studies on these questions have produced mixed results. Some found more, others less prejudice in mixed classrooms. In this study, my co-authors and I set out to explain why past studies have produced such inconsistent results. This might give us also an answer to the question of whether or not we should integrate schools. We conducted our research in the Netherlands. Here we measured prejudice among more than 700 Dutch students. In particular, we measured their prejudice towards the immigrant groups of Turkish and Moroccan people in the Netherlands. We then looked whether the number of immigrant students who have parents from Turkey or Morocco would be related to Dutch students' prejudice. This was not the case. Just like in earlier studies, classroom composition was not related to prejudice. So where do we go from here? Well, my co-authors and I discovered a shortcoming of most of the previous research. Most previous studies relied on the assumption that students in school classes only have positive relationships with each other. In fact, a typical study would assume that students from different ethnic groups would start liking each other. Over time, students would then generalize from their new friend to the ethnic group of this friend in general. A Dutch student would say, "Well, I like my classmate Ali, who has parents from Morocco. Thus, Moroccans in general must be nicer than I have previously assumed." So we tested whether this reasoning was true. We looked how prejudice changed over time of only those Dutch students who liked their Turkish and Moroccan classmates. And in fact, we found that these Dutch students held less prejudice towards Turks and Moroccans in general at the end of the school year. But why didn't we see this effect in the first place? We think the reason lies in the fact that not all students like each other. In fact, if you think back to your own time in school, you can easily think of classmates that you did not like. These may have been bullies or students you did not like for some other reason. That's why we looked at how many negative relationships there were in our sample. For all Dutch students, we calculated whether they liked the majority of their Turkish or Moroccan classmates. Likewise, we calculated how many disliked the majority of their Turkish or Moroccan classmates. We found that there were roughly as many positive relationships as there were negative relationships. 25% of Dutch students liked most of their Turkish or Moroccan classmates. In contrast, 20% disliked most of their Turkish and Moroccan classmates. So not all relationships are positive. But what is the effect of negative relationships on prejudice? We found in our sample that the more Turkish or Moroccan classmates Dutch students disliked, the more prejudiced they became. In fact, the increase in prejudice was almost as strong as the reduction we've seen through positive relationships. This finding might explain why we didn't see an effect of ethnic classroom composition in the first place. Positive relationships lead to less prejudice, negative relationships lead to more prejudice. These two effects cancel each other out if we only look at what happens in the aggregate. Some students develop less prejudice, others become more prejudiced, and in total we don't see any movement. So what's the take-home message of our research? Our main conclusion is that ethnic integration of school classes does have important effects on prejudice. Previous studies missed this because they overlooked the negative relationships between some students. Thus, if we want to reduce prejudice and foster integration, we should indeed ethnically integrate school classes. However, our studies showed that mixing is not enough. Additional efforts are needed to promote positive relationships between students. That does not mean that everybody must like everyone else. This will never happen. But we need to make sure that disliking relationships don't align with the ethnic background of students.